Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and this is episode number 34. Today, our guest here at the show is Bill Nye. Bill is a professional speaker, trainer, and consultant for the multifamily industry. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you, Adrian. It's good to be with you today.
Bill, to get started, tell us a little bit about your background, personal, professional.
Okay. Well, I think a little bit of a unique background in that I started working in the multifamily industry in 1994 as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment community in Durham, North Carolina called South Point Apartments. And I knew nothing about apartments. I'd never lived in an apartment, had never worked at an apartment community, but I knew maintenance. I knew how to fix things. Prior to that, I had been a tech rep for York International. So I was a heat pump advisor for York. And so I knew heating and air conditioning inside and out. And, I was also, prior to that, I was in the United States Air Force. And as an aircraft mechanic and as a flight engineer on a C-141 Starlifter, I learned how to read a schematic. And if you can read a schematic on a large jet like a C-141, you can read a schematic on a dishwasher, refrigerator, anything, because they're very simple compared to that. So that background really, prepared me, I think, from a technical standpoint, to be a pretty good maintenance guy. And I learned very quickly that it was more about customer satisfaction than it was about anything else. Some of that, of course, meant that you had to know what you were doing, but just being a good communicator, being friendly, warm, engaging with the residents seemed to be really valuable. And it wasn't long before the owners of my community recognized that I might have some skills that would transfer into being a good community manager. So my community manager had gone out on maternity leave and decided after having the baby she wasn't going to come back to work. So they suddenly needed a new manager, and lo and behold, they picked the maintenance guy. And so I did that for a while, and then I won a couple of awards through the Triangle Apartment Association in Raleigh. And all of a sudden, people are paying attention, and a few people know your name. And the next thing you know, I'm interviewing for a regional manager's position. But through that, I began to learn, that there were a lot of missing pieces in the multifamily industry, one of which was really good training. And, I came from an educational background, was a former high school school teacher, taught American history. And so I decided 25 years ago to launch my own business. And so that's what I did. I went to work for myself as a speaker, trainer, and consultant. Through that, I developed a lot of relationships that actually ended up putting me back into the game of day-to-day operations. One of my consulting clients decided that if I wasn't going to continue to consult for him, he wasn't going to continue to develop new properties. So he offered me the opportunity to join his organization as their CEO. And so I took that opportunity, and it was an amazing 8 years. And that just kind of opened some other doors, and then from there, some other opportunities. And so it's been a very interesting journey. But I recently decided it's time to go back to work for myself and relaunch, if you will, on a full-time basis, my training, speaking, and consulting business. I never completely shut it down, and so that's what I've done, and just having a lot of fun going back and doing that again.
You had a stellar career. I started as a maintenance person, becoming an executive in a company. One of the things that everybody in maintenance, and me included, had a challenge with was the fact that we don't really see a very long career path for us maintenance professionals. And back in about 2005 or six, I read something about you. I read about your name on a blog on Grace Hill, and someone was saying, "Hey, look at this professional. Look at Bill. He started as a maintenance person, and then he ended up in an executive position. This is such an amazing story," and it truly is. Even though we never met each other over the years, this was already stuck in my mind. If one individual could make this transition and be so successful, that others could do too. So this brings me to the question, Bill. What do you think it'll take for someone to be a successful manager first. We're not really getting to the executive part. I'd like to get that a little bit later on, but for a maintenance professional, what type of qualities or what type of things they need, the skill set they need to have in order to become a good manager. And it starts with being a maintenance manager, not necessarily a community manager, but just to become a manager, from a technician, someone that's very technically inclined that could fix things, to becoming a good manager.
I think the two things that are really key, and they certainly have served me well, and I've tried to share this with others. One is just being a really good communicator. People don't want to give more responsibility to somebody who can't communicate with the amount of responsibility they have today. So if you're in charge of two or three things and you can't keep people informed of those two or three things, nobody's going to give you six or seven things to be in charge of, because you can't seem to communicate with the right people about the three or four. So really just being a good communicator, keeping people informed. And communication isn't just giving people the facts, but it's also knowing how to do it. And by that, what I mean is, communicate in a way that is optimistic and positive and upbeat. And sometimes the news may be bad, but really good doctors, surgeons, nurses, they learn the importance of, if you have to communicate to somebody that they have cancer, you have to tell them they have cancer. But you don't walk into the room and say, you have cancer, it's going to completely bankrupt you, it's going to destroy your family, and after years of treatment, you're going to die. I mean, that's a terrible message, right? And those things may be true, but that's a terrible message. And so when I say being a good communicator, it's also knowing how to communicate the news in a way that gives people a sense of optimism that everything is going to be okay. And so I think that's really important. And I think the other thing, and this is probably most important of everything, is always putting the development of other people ahead of your own needs, your own desires, your own wishes. But always thinking first about others. Am I supporting the team? Am I taking good care of my residents? Do people feel like they're better because I'm here? And so, just putting the needs of other people, really having that servant attitude, if you will, and just putting the needs of other people ahead. Because great leaders, one of the most inspirational movies I've ever seen is with Mel Gibson, the movie We Were Soldiers. And there's a scene in that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a scene in that movie. They have this terrible battle in Vietnam, and it's based on a true story. And there's lots of carnage, lots of casualties, whether it's, soldiers have died or soldiers have been gravely wounded. And Mel Gibson refuses to leave the battlefield. They try to pull his character off the battlefield, Colonel Hal Moore, and he refuses to go. And he says, I'm not leaving this battlefield. My feet will be the last feet to get off the ground. And there's a scene in the movie where they've removed all of the soldiers, the dead, the wounded, the living. They got them all off the battlefield. And the camera pans in on his combat boots as he steps onto the rung of the helicopter as the helicopter flies off the battlefield. And it's one of those scenes that just, to me, it's so inspirational that that's leadership. Leadership is, Simon Sinek wrote the book, Leaders Eat Last. And it's that mentality that you put the needs of other people ahead of your own needs.
That's such an amazing and inspiring way to put it, Bill. Um, my next question is really, from a manager, from becoming a great manager to becoming an executive. What are a few things that you would recommend for someone that wants to follow that path, that wants to follow the path of leadership, and also becoming an executive with a company, if that's all possible?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say that I never really thought about that. I never went into this looking at the next step. What do I have to do to get from here to there? Things just sort of happen for me, if you will. And I understand that, they happen for a reason, meaning that I was doing certain things that got the attention of other people. But, I never woke up and said, if I do this and this, then I think I'll have an opportunity to become this or that. And the reason I shared that is because I took whatever position I was in, I took it very seriously. I didn't look at it as a stepping stone to the next position. I looked at it as the most important position I'll ever have, and give this position my absolute best. Be the best maintenance guy that these residents have ever seen. Be the best property manager that these residents have ever seen. And I found that by doing that, organically, you start to get some attention. And that, again, that wasn't the goal. That's just one of the fruits that grows from that tree of being the best. So I'd say it starts there is that if you want to progress in your career, take the job you have now and look at it as the only job you'll ever have, and be the absolute best at that job that you could possibly be. And if you are, then the right people will notice, and the right people will want to align themselves with you, whether that's another company's executives, your own company's executives will notice, but the right people will notice that, and they'll say, this person is really, really, listen, one of the things that happens sometimes is that people look at somebody, yourself, you're working as a maintenance supervisor and you're running a large property with a large crew and you're really, really good at it. There's always going to be those people out there who say, well, we can't afford to promote Adrian because how do we fill his spot? But that's small ball thinking. That's not a winning mentality. The winning mentality is being around people who look at it and say, if he can have this much of an impact in this role, imagine how much of an impact he'll have in even a bigger role. But while you're in that role, I think one of the goals is just like I said, to look at it as this is the last job I'll ever have. So I want to be great at this job. But while you're doing that, never, ever, ever turn down an opportunity to gain new skills. By that I mean even if you have to pay for some of it yourself, taking classes, attending seminars, attending conferences, and really being intentional about who you surround yourself with, who you listen to, who you take advice from. One of the greatest people I ever worked with was a woman named Kathy Howard. She was the manager that had the baby and went out on maternity leave. And I tell people all the time that Kathy Howard was the catalyst for my career in so many ways, because Kathy was that person that believed in me, communicated well with me, and trusted and respected me. And she really taught me, you know, how to be a great leader in the multifamily industry. And I tell people, when I'm speaking around the country, I tell people often, be somebody else's Kathy Howard, and that's one of the things I try to do is as I'm working with companies, whether I'm an executive or whether I'm speaking, training, or consulting, I try to be somebody's Kathy Howard, that person that shows them the way.
Very inspiring. Very inspiring. A lot of times I say that inspiration comes from the most unexpected places, and leadership is really not a position. You could be someone with no title, or you could be a groundskeeper, or you could be an entry-level person and still be the person that actually inspires people and makes them go, gives them a purpose. I completely disagree. Someone says, leadership positions. I don't think there is such a thing as a leadership position. It's not a position. It's actually it's influence. Leadership is influence. And by the way, I like to take your take on this because obviously you've been in executive positions. I know that you're passionate about leadership. What's your take on leadership? Do you agree to or do you disagree that leadership is actually not connected to necessarily a title? Anyone could be a leader regardless of their title, or you could be an executive and actually not be a leader.
John Maxwell wrote a book about that. And in the book, he talks about the 5 levels of leadership. And he actually says that level 1 is, he calls it position leadership. And by that, what he means is you're the leader simply because you have the position or the title. You're the manager, therefore you're the leader of that team. But he's very clear that that is the lowest level of leadership. And if you're an executive, you're still the leader because of your position. You never lose that leadership position title, but great leaders build upon that title or position is simply the foundation and not the pinnacle. And I think that's really important to understand. A lot of people think that, I use the example, Adrian. I don't know if you have children, but I have 3 children. And, one of the things I often talk about is that sometimes parents think that the title of parent gives you all-inclusive rights. I'm the parent, therefore I can say whatever I want. I'm the parent, therefore I can do whatever I want. Being a parent doesn't give you the right to walk over and slap your child in the face. But there are parents who think that it does. And there are leaders who think that it does. And I hope that makes sense. And I don't mean literally smack somebody in the face, but there are leaders who think that because I'm the CEO, because I'm the founder, I'm the owner, therefore I can say whatever I want. Well, that's pretty sad. And that's what I call all-inclusive rights. That you think because you have that title or position, you can behave any way you want. I think the opposite. The greater the title, the greater the position, the greater the responsibility to be the right kind of person, to bring, I believe very strongly that it's not the job of a leader to motivate people. I believe motivation has to be internal. I think it's incumbent upon every person to motivate themselves. But I think great leaders bring inspiration. And I believe this very strongly, and I've said this many times. Hire people who are motivated, create a culture that inspires, and the result will be passion for what they do. And, I don't think a lot of people understand that, but I think that, if you're a great leader, you inspire people, you build a culture that inspires people. And then those people become very passionate about what they do. They're passionate about who they serve. They're passionate about the customer. They're passionate. I call them the three C's. They're passionate about the customer, the coworker, and the company. And it's hard to defeat any company that has a large base of employees who are passionate about the three C's.
This brings me to my next question, the next topic that I want to discuss with you, Bill. And this is what is known widely as the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
Others call it, the Great Shuffle. Anyway, there's a phenomenon that's been happening, and it happened to coincide with COVID hitting, with the pandemic. A lot of it probably has to do with it, and I think it's more than just people basically quitting jobs and finding different jobs or better jobs. It's more of a mindset shift that's taking place in society, and obviously multifamily industry is affected too. So I'd like to get your take on how did this started? Where are we in a process? You think we're in a process? Are we still at the beginning? We're in the middle of it. We're about to. Is this about to end? And how do we actually overcome these challenges that are coming with people resigning left and right?
Yeah, no, it's not about to end. In fact, I think it's only going to get worse. I actually reject the idea that it's a great resignation. Oh, yeah, sure. It's a massive resignation, but I call it something different. I call it the Great Awakening. And here's what I mean that what they call it the Great Resignation almost says that there's nothing we can do to change it. There's a lot we can do to change it. And it starts with understanding why people are resigning. Now, here's what's interesting. If you look at the data from the multifamily industry prior to, when the government locked us down in March of 2020, you'll see a tremendous amount of turnover with leasing agents and maintenance techs, or as I like to call them, service techs. Well, why are these folks resigning? Because they're looking for $1 an hour more, right? But you didn't see a high percentage. If you look at the data from organizations like the National Apartment Association, the National Multi-Housing Council, the data says that that was the highest percentage of turnover. And when you get to service managers or maintenance supervisors, community managers, the turnover goes down. When you get to the regional level, the turnover gets even lower. When you get to the executive level or regional vice president level, director of operations level, the turnover gets even lower and lower. That's no longer true. Now we're seeing high turnover at the executive level, at the RVP level, at the regional level, at the community manager level, at the service manager level. Why? That's why I call it the Great Awakening. Now, I want you to stay with me for a moment and hear my theory. And a lot of my theory is based on data, by the way, but I want you to hear my theory. When you were a child and your dad went to work, came home, did he ever openly talk about whether or not he was happy at work? My dad didn't. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And I
No.
never knew whether or not my dad liked his job, had no clue whether or not he was happy. And I certainly never heard my dad use the word culture. See, to me, the word culture was some exotic term that you assign to a group of people who lived in grass huts on some remote island somewhere. That was a culture. And now today, everybody's talking about culture. So here's what's happened. Over the years, we now have this social media phenomena. And it began with people becoming, influencers, social media millionaires. The Kardashians, they don't sing, they're not in movies, they're not actors or actresses. They've not invented anything. They've not cured any diseases, and yet they're worth millions. Well, how did they get to that point? They got there by becoming social media phenomenons, right? And so by being really popular on Instagram and Facebook and now today TikTok, they've become they have millions of followers. So what that's done is it's planted the seed in everybody's mind that if you want to get attention, you have to be very active on social media. Now, for guys like you and me, and I know you're very active on LinkedIn. I see your posts all the time. I read them. I try to like them when you're wearing an Eagles hat, but as a Cowboys fan, that's hard for me to do. But you know, I follow you on LinkedIn. You follow me on LinkedIn, and from the business world, that's our social media platform. So here's what's happened. Because social media has become so popular, everybody now knows what everybody else is doing and thinking and offering. And so you're working for a company that refuses to entertain the idea of flexible work hours, meaning working from home sometimes or having to be in the office. You work for a company that does nothing for their employees when they have to go out on maternity leave. And this I'm just naming a couple of things, but you're working for a company that's that way, and that's the culture of your company. But you see people posting all over social media, their paid maternity leave, their flexible working hours, their unlimited vacation, their efforts to, social justice, their efforts to become more, diversified, within their employee ranks and their executive ranks and so on and so forth. And you see that, and those things are important to you. You are now aware of the fact that I don't work in the right culture. That appears to be a better culture. And so what has happened is that people are now measuring their own experience against other people's experience. See, your dad and my dad didn't have that because there was no social media, right? And so our fathers couldn't look at what was going on at other companies because it wasn't out there. They were just happy to have a job and put food on the table and a roof over their family's head. But today, people want more than that. Here's what they want. They want to know that they're a part of something that's making the world a better place. That's what they really want to know. That's what they really want to believe. And so they're measuring their own experience. And when they see a better experience on social media, they leave their current experience to pursue that experience. And so that's why I say it's not the great resignation, it's a great awakening that you can no longer hide your culture. Now, you can do certain things to trick people into thinking that it's something that it's not. And that will always happen. That's never going to go away. Some people are really good at their messaging. But the biggest thing is most people aren't good at their messaging. See, they don't understand that the Kardashians became the Kardashians not because they got on social media, but because they knew how to use social media. And so listen, I worked for an owner years ago. He was extremely wealthy. He loved deep sea fishing. And in North Carolina every year, there's a big blue marlin fishing tournament called Big Rock. And the boat that brings in the biggest blue marlin wins $1 million. So it's a pretty prestigious fishing event. This guy that I worked for won it twice. Twice. Now, you can imagine he didn't have some rinky-dink little boat. He had a fishing boat that, I mean, it was incredible. He had his own plane. He kept his boat docked in the Dominican. He had his own private plane to fly to Dominican to get on his boat. He owned two amazing homes, one near our office that was on a private lake, and one just off the coast of North Carolina. And these were multi-million dollar homes. But see, to the team, they knew him as a guy in jeans and work boots and drove a Chevy pickup truck. I was probably the only one who knew what he really had, but he didn't flaunt it. My point is, you got to understand how to use social media. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't begrudge anybody what they acquire in this life. But you got to be careful with how you use social media. If you use your social media to promote yourself and the fact that you're wealthy and you have all these things, that turns people off. And so people don't want to work there because they see that as the culture. They see that as a greedy culture, right? And so you got to, the Kardashians knew how to use social media and look where they are. And so, companies got to really be smart about their message in their social media, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, I don't care which platform we're talking about. Send the right message. Make sure that you're very intentional about your message, because if you're sending a message that says we have a really healthy culture that will inspire you and make you passionate about working for us, then great people want to work there. And if you've got a message that says, we're greedy, we're selfish, we're abusive, we're aggressive, then you're going to get what's left. The best people aren't going to want to work in that kind of culture. And it's all out there for the world to see. And you know as well as I do, once it's out there, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's out.
It's so true. I do want to pick up on something that you mentioned, Bill, and you mentioned the
Sure.
Kardashians and influencers in general. Do you personally think that there's any value in companies, management companies, hire industry influencers? And I use this as a broad term. I don't even have a person like very defined. I just know that someone that's influential, right? Someone that gets a lot of attention on social media, on the platforms. I think that's an influencer in my view. Do you think that there's any value in companies hiring in industry influencers? I have my own opinion, so I'm not gonna say that, but I like to get your take on it. Do you think if there's any value in it?
Yeah, I think there can be value if you understand why you want to use that influencer. What is it that you want to accomplish? If it's a marketing message, yeah, listen, to have somebody promote your company, your business that other people respect, that goes a long ways. You watch a Mercedes-Benz commercial, and if you're a fan of John Hamm, that's John Hamm's voice. George Clooney, he has an iconic voice. I'm trying to think of the guy that played in Driving Miss Daisy, Morgan Freeman. That's an iconic voice. And people, studies have found that those voices instill trust. Well, if John Hamm is promoting it, I don't know what John Hamm drives. I don't know if he drives a Mercedes or not. Matthew McConaughey does the Lincoln commercials. Does he drive a Lincoln? I don't know. But the commercials make me believe he does. And I don't, it's never made me go out and buy a Lincoln. I drive a Ford. My point is, yeah, I think if you understand what it is that you want that person to help you with, then yeah, I think it has value. But I think the important thing is do your homework. Make sure that before you decide to, hook your wagon up to somebody, that's an influencer, make sure there's somebody that people actually trust and like, and not, somebody that just is full of bravado.
Yeah, it's that, and I also think it's an. Do you want to have some sort of alignment between what your brand is and what the influencer's brand is? Because if there's no alignments, you see that I guess they're passionate about different things that what your company should be about, then probably that's not a good fit to begin with. But if you do find a common ground, some alignment, I think personally that there's a lot of they could be a vehicle, and I've seen examples of different industry influencers going to certain companies, and literally I could see how they're driving culture. They're literally driving culture. They're building culture themselves by uh, exposing more of what a company does great, and also by getting more people attracted to the company. Because if people like someone, they tend to like to work in the same place, like to share the place, even if it's not like the physical place. Just working at the same company as someone that's, you already admire, it's a big deal. I would rather work for that type of person than for a person that I don't like, or I never
Sure.
heard of. I
Mhm.
think it's more likely. So to that respect, I think there's really value. But like you
Yeah.
said, you have to be careful what you're attaching yourself to, because if it's not an alignment, then it's not just doing it for the sake of it, just because they're an influencer for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Bill, about 4 or 5 days ago, I saw a very interesting post of yours on LinkedIn, and you have coined the term culture currency. Would you like to elaborate a little bit? Because it's been a fascinating post to me.
So that's a term that I came up with. I've not read that anywhere. I've never heard anybody else use that term. My guess is you probably have never heard that term before until you read it when I
I
posted it
have
on
not.
LinkedIn.
It was the first time, and that
Yeah.
made it even more interesting.
Yeah. So every culture has its currency. And if you think back in earlier times of civilization, those cultures had currency, things of value that would allow you to then survive. And so, in today's world, when we talk about, a company culture, even within a company culture, every company has its own unique currency. Now, what does that mean? That means the thing that makes you valuable to that company that you exchange for something else. So, for instance, we exchange currency for food, water, and shelter, right? We exchange currency for vacations. We exchange currency for a wide variety of things. Same thing within a company culture. But here, you're probably somewhat familiar, at least, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs: the id, the ego, and the superego. And when Maslow talks about the id, those are the basic necessities in life: food, water, and shelter. The ego is, the need for appreciation and recognition, and the super ego is self-actualization. And I always say self-actualization is when you can no longer tell the difference between work and play. You love what you do, and to you it doesn't feel like work. And you and I have both been there, and have done things that we love so much that it doesn't feel like work. But you and I have also been there where we go and it's clearly work, and you're only doing it because you have to survive. So, in bringing this back to culture currency, it's that thing that the leadership within that organization puts out, gives you as some form of currency that you then exchange for your needs. Now, what's the most basic need? Food, water, and shelter. A toxic culture only gives you enough currency to survive. So that every day you have to come back to work because you're just surviving. If you didn't have this job, you would lose everything. So, for instance, here's what I mean by that. I grew up in a home with 6 kids. I was one of 6. I was the middle boy and the fourth of 6 children. And my mom ran the house. My dad worked. We were farmers, and even though we were farmers, my dad worked outside of the home. My mom did not. And so mom kind of ran the farm. She ran the household. And my mother was a very stern, very strict, very heavy-handed kind of a parent. And my mother wanted to know at all times what we were all doing, what we were up to. Well, no 12-year-old wants to go work out in the field all day long. So you're always looking for opportunities to get lost. And when you grew up on a large farm with lots of land out in the middle of the country, there are plenty of places you could go and hide and get lost. Go out into the woods, go squirrel hunting or whatever. Go out to the stock pond and go fishing, whatever. But I had a couple of siblings that were really bad at school. And when you're bad at something, you don't go there and give everything you have, right? You go there and the student that doesn't care about their education isn't typically a well-behaved student. And so I had a couple of siblings because they were bad students. They were bad at school. They were always in trouble. So here's the currency. Because my mom wanted to always be in control, and she was such a strict disciplinarian, in order to know what we were doing, she needed information. So information became the currency. Because if I had information on one of my siblings, maybe they had done something bad at school, or they had run off and done something that I knew was against the rules, and I shared that with my mother, that had value to my mother. So that's the currency. I'm giving it to her. What does she give me in return? She gives me favor. In other words, there's no chance I'm in trouble because now she's happy with me because I gave her what was of value, information, the currency. And in return, she gave me favor. I'm not in trouble. And so every culture has its currency. Now, here's a positive example. And by the way, let me just go back to that. You know, years later, I was on the phone with my mother, and she was lamenting the fact that her six children just weren't close. And she said, "I just hate that the six of you aren't close." And I, as lovingly as I could, I said, "Mom, you taught us to turn on one another as kids in order to gain your favor, and that taught us not to trust one another. And now here as we are as adults, and we don't trust each other, that's why we're not close. You can't you can't reward us for turning on one another as children and then expect us to trust one another as adults." And I didn't say that to hurt my mother. It's just the absolute truth. That was the currency within that culture. Now, that wasn't what my mom intended to happen, but most cultures are unintentional. There are very few cultures that are actually intentionally built to be what you want it to be. Most cultures just grow organically. And here's what I mean by that. They become the personality of the leader. Now, because my mother was a strong, strict, harsh personality, it was a culture of fear. We were all afraid of her. And so, in order to escape the fear, we gave her information, that's the currency, so that she would go easy on us, which relieved the fear. Does that make sense? And
Absolutely, absolutely.
and so you know, for all of those companies out there that have these unintended cultures, it's actually a mirrored image of the leader. So, in other words, if the leader is a tyrant, if the leader is abusive, if the leader, you know, and by the leader, I mean, you know, whether it's the founder, the CEO, you know, the boss, it can be the committee manager, the regional manager. If the leader is a heavy, harsh, angry, stern person, if that's their personality, then the culture becomes a culture of fear. But here's the problem. Very few people ever look in the mirror and say, I need to work on myself. I'm not a very good person. I need to be a better person. And so they actually love the culture and think it's a really healthy culture because it's a mirrored image of their own personality. And because they love themselves, they love the culture. They didn't actually intentionally build that culture, it grew on its own. And I'll get back to that in a moment if you don't mind. But
Not at all. Not at all. Please
to
go.
now to give a more positive example, my wife works for a company that has an incredible culture, really healthy. You know, really, and so they're constantly named one of the best places to work by multiple organizations. They're constantly earning awards and national recognition for their resident satisfaction. She works in the multifamily business. And so their residents love living at their communities. Their employees love working at the communities. Sounds like those two things go hand in hand, right? And they do. And so, but their culture is so healthy. Here's their currency. They put a premium on problem solving and new ideas, innovation. Now, unhealthy cultures reserve those two things, problem solving and innovation, to the executives, right? I mean, that's what most companies do. You got to be the COO, the CEO, you know, the RVP. They're the ones who are allowed to solve the problems. They're, you know, the CFO. They're the ones who are allowed to bring new innovation. Everybody else is just supposed to make them work. But it's our job as executives to solve the problems and to bring innovation to our company. Well, not at my wife's company. It's everybody's job. Now that sounds like a pretty healthy culture, you know, where you're encouraging your employees to solve problems at the lowest level and to bring new ideas to the company at the lowest level. And so anybody who brings that is viewed upon as a great employee. That's their currency, is problem solving and innovation. And so as a result, you know, it's a really, really healthy culture with a healthy currency. But, when you have an unhealthy culture, you have a currency that's loyalty. Now, a lot of people would say, how is loyalty an unhealthy currency? Because what are you loyal to? I guess is probably the right question. If I demand that you're loyal to me and you prove you're loyal to me, that's the currency. You prove your loyalty to me, you can do just about anything. You can be a bad performer. You can blow your budget, and I will never hold you accountable because you're loyal to me. And so you see, I make it all about me as opposed to all about the customer, all about what's best for the company. And what I found is that people who put a premium on loyalty, the minute you're not loyal, I will scorch your earth. I will make you sound and appear to be the worst human being ever. And I've always told people, don't be loyal to me. I'll make a mistake. I'll take you down the wrong path. I am human, I am fallible, I will screw up. Be loyal to a set of values. Be loyal to a belief system. Be loyal to a vision and to a mission, but don't be loyal to me as a human being. So I've never allowed loyalty to be the currency because I don't want that burden, that responsibility. I want people to be loyal to something else. So, I said I wanted to go back to this idea with the culture being intentional and unintentional. If you were to go out into your backyard and dig up a piece of ground, remove all the grass, and then walk away and leave it, come back to that spot a year later. Is it still bare or did something grow? Something grew, right? Now, what grew? Did tomatoes grow there? No. Did sweet corn grow there? No. Did, beautiful flowers grow there? No. What grew there? Weeds. Who needs weeds? Who wants weeds? Nobody. That's my point. If you're not intentional about your culture will still grow, but it will never be anything you want. It'll be something that you don't want. It'll be fear. It'll be chaos. It'll be, backstabbing. It'll be toxic. You got to be intentional about your culture. But the best way to tell what kind of culture a company has is to really find out what their currency is. Because in really ruthless countries, North Korea, we hear stories of how the people are starving. The government gives them just enough currency to survive. That's the lowest level. That's the id. That's the food, water, and shelter. A company with a bad culture doesn't give their employees abundance. They give their employees just enough. Companies that have a good culture give their employees the ego, the recognition and appreciation. That's more than just enough. The companies with the best cultures give their employees the opportunity to self-actualize. That's the super ego. That's when you can no longer tell the difference between work and play. And so I've been a part of both cultures. I've been a part of companies that just give their employees enough to survive, and it's a toxic culture. And there's fear, and there's gossip, and there's backstabbing, and those types of things. And I've been a part of an organization where you give your employees in abundance, and they thrive, and they love what they're doing because the currency is freedom. The currency is independence. The currency is freedom of thought. Like my wife's company, where you have the freedom to solve problems. You have the freedom to bring new ideas to the table. See, that's abundance. And great cultures, just like with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, great cultures, great companies, great countries, the people have abundance. Companies that are run by dictators, their people are starving. They just get enough to survive. And in a toxic culture, people aren't thriving, they are surviving.
Well, I guess, if nothing else, for selfish reason, there's a huge advantage to have employees that are thriving. Okay, let's just say that you really don't even necessarily don't care or don't want the best for them, but you should have a vested interest as an owner, as a CEO, as an executive into them thriving. Why? Because you're gonna create a type of environment where people come to work because they want to, not because they have to. not because they're fear for not having food on the table or money to pay their next rent and live paycheck to paycheck. When you create this environment where they could be themselves, they could be the best that they could be, and also become wealthy too. Like you said, there's nothing wrong in becoming wealthy or rich. Let's say that. Just give them the opportunity and educate them towards that, and create a type of environment and reward the type of behavior that you want to see. Because I think this is what culture is about too, in one way. It's that the type of behavior that you're rewarding and you're getting, that's the type of behavior that you're going to see from your employees, and it becomes your culture. Do you disagree?
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what I mean by currency.
Yes,
The way
yes,
you reward your employees, that becomes the currency.
yes,
Going back to my story about my mother, the currency was information. Well, what was the reward? It was relief from my mother's anger.
yeah.
And so, that information was the currency, talking about my wife's company. But no, you're absolutely right. One of the things, Adrian, I think people miss is watch how a company treats somebody when they leave. That will tell you a lot about whether or not that's a place where you would like to work. And I've always said, you know, re applaud people on their way out the door, not for the person who's leaving, but for everybody else who's watching. Because if you work for me and your best friend is Charlie, and Charlie quits, he takes a job with a competitor. And as the COO, I go after Charlie. I abuse Charlie. I ridicule Charlie. I insult Charlie. He's not loyal. I can't believe he's going to work for those guys. He's going to find out it's not so great over there. And now at this point, Charlie's like, man, am I glad I left. Listen, this guy has no respect for me, but you still work for me. And what did I do to you? I've killed the respect you have for me as my own employee. And I don't get that, so I always tell people, somebody on their way out the door, you know, listen, I've always, as an executive, I always try to create a culture where people could tell me that they're going to interview for a job instead of telling me that they've accepted a job. That's a very different dynamic.
It
What do
is.
most people do today? They call in sick. They make up an excuse. I have a dentist appointment. My kid is home sick from school. I have a doctor's appointment. No, they're going on a job interview. Well, why do they feel like they have to lie? Because they're afraid of retribution. And so I've always tried to create a culture to where I tell people, hey, listen, if you're a good employee, our competitors should want you. And I'm honored and flattered that they do. That says that not only do we see the value in you, but they see the value in you. And that's a wonderful thing. But you got to understand that people are going to try and poach those folks. And listen, that has to be okay because I want what's best for you. And if they offer you something that's better for you than what I'm offering you, you should take it. And if I'm the right kind of leader, I should be happy for you. And so I've always tried to tell people, listen, you don't have to lie and say you're going for an interview. Just tell us. There will be no retribution. There will be no retaliation. We will wish you well because a couple things happen. One, you'll come back and we'll learn what they're offering, which helps us to know whether or not we're competitive. If they come back and say, wow, they're offering me $10,000 a year more than what I'm making for the same position, we got to adjust our pay scale. So that information becomes very helpful to us. But most importantly, what it does is it creates a culture where it says, I recognize why you do what you do. Why do people get up and go to work for somebody else every day? Because that's how they take care of their family. And this idea that a person should be loyal to their boss or to their company is misplaced. I tell everybody who's ever worked for me, don't be loyal to me. Don't be loyal to the company. Be loyal to your family. Because if you were independently wealthy, you wouldn't come to work here every day. You come to work here every day to provide for your family. And if somebody offers you something that's better for your family, more flexible hours, shorter work days, no weekends, never being on call, more money, free health insurance. See, all those more vacation, all those things allow you to do something more with and for your families, right? And so if somebody offers you more for you and your family, because you're loyal to your family, you should take it. And I should be thankful for your contributions. And also, it says to everybody else that we helped you get there because we care about you. We developed you. We gave you the tools necessary to make you even more valuable. And as much as I wish I had an opportunity for you here, you're ready for more responsibility. That opportunity isn't available in our company. So I'm glad that you found it someplace else, and we wish them well. And I coined a phrase at one of my previous companies. We called them boomerangs. A boomerang was somebody who left for a better opportunity, only to discover it wasn't a better opportunity, and they came back. Because when you throw a boomerang, that's what it does, right? We literally had wooden boomerangs made with the company's name and logo on it. And when you quit on your last day, we gave you a boomerang and we wished you well and said to you, if you ever want to come back, just grab this boomerang and come on back. And Adrian, I can't tell you how many boomerangs we had, how many people left because they thought that it was going to be a better opportunity, only to realize no, they don't care about me and my career and my development like my last company. And I would get calls literally, and I'm not making this up. I'd have people call me and they would be crying on the other end of the phone, and here's what they'd say: can I come home? That's how they felt about the company. Can I come home? And of course, the answer was yes. We'd love to have you back. But I always said, you don't work for me anymore. You're no longer our employee. You're their employee. You have to leave them the right way. If you don't leave them the right way, I don't hire anyone who leaves their current employer the wrong way. So be respectful, give your notice, work out your notice, and then come back.
I I have so much to say, Bill. So much to say. You build a home for them. When they
Yeah,
when they ask you, can I come back home? You build a home for them. And that says a lot about who you are as a leader. Uh, Employees on the way out, the way they treat it, right? What most companies I don't think realize is that if you mistreat someone on their way out, this goes out into the world. People talk to people all the time. They talk to a lot of people, to a lot of people. And a lot of times you don't even realize with how many people. Let's say someone that's connected on social media with a
yeah,
thousand people, they put something negative about this experience. This multiplies, it could go viral. And then are you the type of company that really want to have to handle this type of damage control? Like, is that really healthy? Is that really serving you? Also, you as a direct manager to that person, to that employee, do you remember that you have to leave your previous job to become who you are, to have this
yeah.
job? How did you
Right.
wish you were treated when you left your last job? If that was a
Great
bad
point.
experience, why would you want to replicate that experience to someone on their way out? They want to do better for themselves and for their family. I completely don't understand. There's no logic and there's no sense in it. It's just it's purely selfish and very I guess very narrow and self-centered. This type of behavior. Just I always told my teammates. I said, look, I want what's the best for you. And I also understand that what's the best for you might not be within this organization or working with me. I understand that and I accept it. Okay. Please tell me how I could help you. If you're on a way out, if you're unhappy, if you found a better opportunity, come talk to me. I'll even give you advice because I don't want you to end up worse off the where you are today. I have a lot of connections in the industry. I could tell you who the bad players are. And I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm just telling you because I strongly believe you shouldn't go work for that particular company. I'm not, I'm trying to help you. I really want the best for you. And some people took this advice, and I think they ended up better off, whether they ended up staying, changing their mind, or going to a different place. They appreciated that. Uh,
Yep.
you must want the best for people, for your people. You must.
Yeah,
That's a must.
absolutely. One of the things I've always said is that your criticism of me doesn't make me look bad. The fact that you're criticizing me makes you look bad. People aren't suddenly changing their opinion of me. They're changing their opinion of you. And people don't understand that. I left a company years ago, and it was just a bad fit, and I just had had enough, and I resigned. And it was one of those companies that, how dare you? Nobody resigns. Nobody has the right to resign. You don't want to be here? Oh, no, 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 we never wanted you here. And so they go after you like that, and man, they went after me. And it's like, wow, these amateurs, do they not realize what they're doing to their employee base? They're trying to discredit me and make me look like a failure. And I mean, the exodus afterwards, the employee exodus was unbelievable, because it didn't cause people to lose respect for me. It caused people to lose respect for leadership and say, gosh, how in the world can they treat somebody like this? I don't want to work for these people. And so people left like crazy. And I had several people left and came to work for me where I was, and they said, had they treated you with respect on your way out the door, I'd still be there today. But because they didn't, I knew I didn't want to work for them. And so, yeah, it's very, very short-sighted. But that's why I say, that's an amateur move, because a professional knows better than that. A professional knows that that never works. That only blows up in your face. An amateur thinks that's what you have to do in order to make yourself look like you're right.
Very it's the short game, and the
Yeah,
short game
yeah,
never, even if you have a perceived short-term benefit to this move that you try to discredit or or belittle someone on their way out, is not really a benefit. Like your losses are way more than your perceived benefit, because at the end of the day you don't benefit at all. What's the benefit in just mistreating someone? That there's none. That there just isn't one. So I uh, I think that there's a lot of I'm also optimistic about, because I'm seeing this often in many cultures, and this also gives me hope, right? Because there's so much room for improvement and opportunity. I think that, like you said, you mentioned the Great Awakening. Some executives will be part of that Great Awakening, and they will awake one day and say, "Okay, like we must reconsider what we've been doing, because we're losing talent. Things are not going our way. Let's find out why." And then, while looking into the mirror and just being honest with themselves, that's a beginning of something that's better than what they had before. And it's not just them and the company that benefits from this change, but it's also current employees and future employees. So there's so much room and there's so much opportunity for improvement. I am very, very hopeful. And also conversations like you and I have, and I had with other leaders too, and we put them on video, and they're out right there on YouTube for everybody to watch. They give me a lot of hope, because people that are to get it, they will get it, and they'll make a difference. Those are the people that will make a difference. And I'm extremely, extremely optimistic about the future.
I'm not willing to give up. I mean, I think that I kind of see this as my mission in life, is to help, people understand that your company culture, it's going to be there whether you want it to be there or not, and understanding the difference between intentional and unintentional culture, and really just looking in the mirror. Listen, I don't expect people to change who they are, but what we can do, I may feel a certain way, but it can't be about my feelings. It has to be about what's best. And you know, the natural inclination, and I talk about this often when I'm speaking at conferences, is the natural inclination when you start to see a lot of turnover, rather than look in the mirror and say, what's wrong with our culture? What do we have to fix in our culture? The natural inclination is to take more control. And I use the example. I was on a radio broadcast yesterday, and during that broadcast, I used the example of, you're on a plane and you suddenly hit really bad turbulence. What do people do? They grab the armrest. Well, what's that armrest going to do for you? It's not going to remove the turbulence. It's not going to change anything, but it gives you a sense of you're in control. You're not in control. You have no control. But that's what people do, is they grab for something that gives them a sense of security. And oftentimes that security is a false security. It's not actually going to do anything for you. And when you grab control, and remember this, when you grab control, what you're really saying is, I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm the only one who can fix this. And I've always tried when things are not going the way I want them to go, rather than rather than force myself on other people and say, I'm the boss, I'm in control. I like to say, hey, listen, we're not getting the results we want. Let's come together. And I don't have the answer, and no one individual has the answer, but I bet collectively between the four or the five or the six of us, we'll come up with the answer. So rather than taking control, that's to me, that's the time to become even more collaborative. And because, and I don't think people realize that when you take control, what you're really saying to everybody around you is, I'm smarter than you. That's why I'm taking control. I'm better than you. That's why I'm taking control. And I always say that's not the time to take control. That's the time to become more collaborative.
There's also another aspect of this of the situation that you just described, Bill, and I'm seeing this in recruiting. People often are completely heartbroken about how broken the recruiting our recruiting systems are, and their endless interviews. I'm hearing about like 7, 10, 15 interviews uh, over 2, 3 months period of time. How can
Yeah.
someone in the right mind expect that someone will stay in that interview for months, not being able, sometimes they to make money, to have an alternative source of income, and you still like. First of all, I think this comes from a high level of insecurity at a high level. You have a high turnover in your company, and executives are looking at it, and their conclusion is, we made the bad hires because they must be the bad hires because we can retain them. And
Right.
they're not looking inside within to say, okay, what did we do wrong? No, we did something wrong, and what we did, we made a bad hires. So we're gonna fix this. Now we're not just gonna have 1 or 2 interviews. We're gonna have 5 or 7 interviews. We're gonna get them through the panels, and this is gonna last until we find the right candidates for the jobs. And what that does, it's actually the opposite. Every person that goes through this type of horror interviewing process will know, if this is at the very beginning, like this is the image that you're projecting, that you can't really make up your mind after 1 or 2 interviews. How can I realistically expect that once I become an employee, this becomes all of a sudden better? Typically, things go downhill from there. So
Right.
I'm seeing this very, very often, and it's fascinating. But I'm looking at it from a opportunity to improve as an industry. I think there's a very important, and it's a huge one. Those companies that will understand that this is not the way to go, and frictionless process, quick process of hiring, making decisions, they're gonna be in for big wins because they're gonna be beating their competition by a lot.
No, you're absolutely right. And it just caused me to shake my head. I'm like, I don't understand and not only, Adrian, are they taking so much time during this process, but they don't communicate with the candidate during that process either. So you're sitting, you hadn't heard from anyone in weeks. Well, if you're leaving me hanging on the vine like that, at some point, I'm just going to decide I don't think these are the people I want to work with. So yeah, that's a great point. But as much as we talk about that, and it's out there, recruiters continue to do it over and over and over. And I don't understand, just don't understand. I'll tell you, one of the greatest interview processes I've ever been through. I interviewed a guy on Skype, interviewed with a guy for a position on Skype, and he sold it as this is going to be a really long, painful process. I'm heading out of town, and I've got meetings, and you won't hear from me for probably about a week, and then we'll schedule a second interview, and that may be a couple weeks out because I got to get everybody's schedule coordinated. He said typically, at this level, this process takes a couple of months. And I thought, what in the world? That's absolutely terrible. So this guy goes off to this event. And while at this event, he's having dinner with a bunch of people he knows and trusts. And somebody just happened to ask him, what's going on in your world? What are you working on? He's like, well, we're trying to fill this key position. We interviewed this guy, and he mentioned my name. And unbeknown to me, everybody at the table knew who I was. And he didn't know who I was. He'd never heard of me. And so everybody knew who I was. And everybody's like, so when are you going to hire him? He's like, well, we got to go through. I'm like, no, 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 no. You need to quit fooling around and hire this guy. He got so excited the next day he called me and said, "Can you meet us in our corporate office in 2 days?" And 2 days later, I had an offer letter in my hand. But he was going to let that thing drag on for a couple months. And had that happened, I would have never entertained the offer.
Amazing story, amazing story to what's happening out there, and it's the norm, really. It's not the exception, it's the norm.
Yeah,
It happens
yeah.
in most places. We hear the stories. Uh, Bill, I hope to get you back here. I hope that you could make time for me for a second episode. There's just so much more that I wanted to cover. We're a little past the hour.
Sure.
I like if all possible to get you back soon, whenever you're available, because there's just so many other topics I haven't covered, and I know there are also topics that you're as passionate, if not more passionate, about than I am. I would love for you to come back.
Love to come back. So let's schedule that soon.
Uh,
It's been a real pleasure and an honor to be on with you and to, finally talk to you, virtually face to face. And, I hope that this conversation proves to be beneficial to anyone who listens to this recording.
Uh, Bill, in closing, for right now, are there any thoughts that you want to share with the audience? Some things, obviously, there's a lot that we didn't cover, but something that you wish would have covered, we would have covered during our first conversation here.
Yeah, I think that what's important for everybody to keep in mind is that there are great opportunities out there. And in no way, shape, or form will I ever encourage anyone to quit a job. Would never do that. I think that'd be unprofessional. What I will say is, I recently lost my mother. My mom passed away a month ago. 2 years
Sorry
ago,
for
I
your
lost,
loss.
thank you. 2 years ago, I lost my dad. My dad was the coolest person I've ever met. Um, I I didn't know how loved my father was by my hometown until my father passed. Everybody had a story about my dad. Everybody. They actually named a building in my hometown. They named a building after my dad. And every year on the Saturday closest to my dad's birthday, they have a town-wide chicken barbecue to honor my dad's memory. And there aren't many people that can say that they have, something like that happen posthumously, but my dad has. And so my point to this is there are great opportunities out there. And, my advice is, don't settle in life. Take every opportunity you have to grow, to learn, whether it's within your own organization, whether it's your education, regardless of what it is. There are so many opportunities out there. I grew up on a farm and I'm the only one in my family went to college, the only one. And, my kids all have college degrees. And so, we pushed ourselves to expand, our opportunities. And, my advice is always going to be, hey, never, unfortunately, as adults, we stopped growing. All this development when you're a kid, physical development and intellectual development, and then we become adults and we stop pushing ourselves to grow. And you're not going to grow taller. You are what you are, but that doesn't mean you don't stop growing. And so, I want to encourage everybody who's listening to explore the world and through books and tapes on books and podcasts and YouTube videos, because there are so many influencers out there that will just give you one nugget that will make you say, man, that's it. That's the thing that's missing from my life. And so search for those things every day. Never give up, that search for something that will make you a better person.
Very inspiring. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you for coming. I do want to ask you if someone wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
So I have a brand new website. It's my name, Bill Nye, just like Bill Nye the Science Guy. I don't know if I'm allowed to use that guy's name without his permission, but I guess I can. But it's BillNyeApartmentGuy.com. And so anybody can go to Bill Nye Apartment apartmentguide.com. I'm actually launching that website. Should go live today. It's actually a brand new website, and I'm hoping that it'll be live today. And so people can go to BillNyeApartmentGuide.com and they can find me. They can contact me through my website.
I'm gonna make sure to put it in the show notes, just so everybody that wants to, reach out and find you, they have the website right there readily available.
Thank
Bill,
you.
thank you so much for coming. I truly enjoy our conversation. As I said, I hope to get you back here soon to continue it, to do a second episode. And for those in the audience that really watched the episode, we thank you very much for watching. This is Multifamily Chronicles. I'm your host, Adrian Danila, and I hope to see you back here soon. Have a great day.